A hand closed around my shoulder and shoved me sideways before I even saw who it belonged to. My feet slid across the deck plating of Platform 9, and for half a second my whole body braced for the fall, because that is what happens when something twice your size decides you are in its way. The crowd around me pulled back in a ripple, the way a crowd does when it senses something is about to go wrong. I heard someone gasp. I heard metal boots scrape against the floor. And then, instead of falling, I stopped. My heel caught the raised safety lip that runs along the edge of every boarding platform in the Kethri Ascension Hub, a strip of decking 4 centimeters high that most travelers never notice, because most travelers never need it. I noticed it that day. I felt it dig into my boot, felt my balance catch on it like a rope catching a falling climber, and I stayed on my feet. The Sarn who had shoved me did not. He was already leaning forward when his hand left my shoulder, his weight thrown ahead of him in that heavy, chest-first posture his people use when they want to look bigger than everyone around them. It works well against another Sarn. It works terribly against a lip of decking he never bothered to look down at, because he was too busy watching me, waiting for me to crumple the way he expected. I did not crumple. He did. His boot caught the lip. His whole body kept moving forward with nothing left to catch it, because the human he thought he was pushing aside was still standing exactly where he had left her. He pitched over the boarding rail, the one that exists because Platform 9 sits 11 meters above the shuttle bay, with only a containment field between the deck and the open drop. The field caught him. Of course it caught him. Kethri engineers do not build a station where people can actually fall to harm inside the safety zones, not with the insurance costs that would follow. But the field does not catch anyone gently. It catches like a net catches a diver who jumped from the wrong angle, hard enough to knock the wind out of him, humiliating enough that 400 strangers would remember it for the rest of the week. He hung there, upside down, wrapped in a shimmer of pale blue light, 11 meters below the platform, while an automated voice chimed cheerfully overhead. Field integrity nominal. Please remain calm. Retrieval in progress. I looked over the rail. He looked up at me, or down at me, it was hard to say from his angle, and for a moment neither of us spoke. The whole platform had gone quiet in that specific way a crowd goes quiet when it has just watched something it did not expect and does not yet know how to react to. My name is Dessa Voss. I work cargo routing for a shipping company that moves freight between the cloud cities of Orvan Prime and half a dozen orbital stations, and that day I was only trying to catch a shuttle home. I had no plans to become a story that traveled faster than the shuttle itself. The Sarn's name, I would learn within the hour, was Braxa Tholan, a senior loader supervisor with 15 years on the docks and a reputation, among the humans who worked near him, for treating our species the way some people treat a door that is slightly in their way, not with hatred, just with the assumption that we would move because in his experience we always had. You didn't move, he said, still hanging in the field, his voice carrying an odd note of genuine confusion, as if I had broken some law of the universe he had taken for granted his whole life. No, I said, I didn't. Humans are supposed to move, he said. Some of us read the safety briefings, I said. A Kethri station officer arrived at my elbow before the winch had even finished lowering the retrieval cradle. She had 4 eyes, 2 forward and 2 set slightly back along her temples, and all 4 of them were fixed on Braxa rather than on me, which told me everything about who the report was going to focus on. Witness statement, if you don't mind, she said to me, tablet already glowing in her hand. He pushed me, I said. I didn't push back. I didn't do anything. I just didn't fall down. That detail, it turned out, mattered more than anything else I could have said. Coalition transit law does not require a person to fall over simply because someone shoved them. It requires the one doing the shoving to account for the deck, the rail, and the person being shoved. Braxa had accounted for none of it. He had accounted for a human who was supposed to stumble, supposed to go down easily, supposed to be exactly as fragile as 3 centuries of rumors about our species had led an older generation of Sarn to expect. Instead, he had met 4 centimeters of raised decking and 11 meters of open air, because the one variable he had never planned for was a human who simply did not move. They fined him before the shift was over. That part I expected. What I did not expect was how far the footage traveled. Someone on the platform had been recording, the way someone always is, and by the time my shuttle reached the cloud cities that evening, 3 separate people had already sent me links to the same 12 seconds of video, slowed down, sped up, set to music, captioned in 4 different languages. Braxa hanging in the blue light, my face, mildly surprised, looking down at him, the automated voice announcing retrieval in progress, like it was reading out the weather. I did not think much of it at the time. I filed my statement, caught my connection, and went home to my apartment in the lower ring of the Cloud City, where my neighbor Laura Finch was waiting on my doorstep with 2 cups of tea and a look on her face that told me she had already seen the video twice. "You're famous," she said, handing me a cup before I had even set down my bag. "I'm really not," I said. "You are a little bit," she said. "My cousin sent it to me from the orbital yards. People there are calling it the platform drop." I did not think the name would last. Names like that rarely do. But 3 days later, when I walked into the loading office to file a routine cargo manifest, the human clerk behind the counter, a quiet man named Nathan Price, who rarely said more than 2 words to anyone, looked up and grinned before I had even said hello. "Platform drop," he said. "Nice work." "I didn't do anything," I said, for what felt like the 100th time. "I just stood still." "That's the whole point," Nathan said. "That's why everyone's talking about it." I did not fully understand what he meant until later that week, when I was called into a meeting I had not requested, in an office I had never been inside, on a floor of the station I had never had reason to visit. The office belonged to a SARN administrator named Velik Doss, senior liaison for labor relations between the station and the human workers who kept half its cargo systems running. He was older than Braxa, quieter, with pale grayscale patterns along his jaw that marked him as someone who had lived through the early years of coalition contact, back when humans were still an unknown quantity to most of the galaxy. "Sit, please," he said, gesturing at a chair clearly built for a much larger frame than mine. I sat, my feet barely reaching the floor, which felt like exactly the wrong way to start a meeting about the incident everyone kept calling the platform drop. "I understand you have already given your statement," Velik said. "I am not here to take another one. I am here because Braxa Tholin has worked under my authority for 11 years, and in that time, he has shoved past 6 human workers on this station without incident, because in each case they moved out of his way, the way anyone smaller than him usually does. You did not move. I would like to understand why." "I read the safety briefing," I said. "It mentions the deck lip. I remembered it was there." Velik studied me for a long moment with an expression I could not quite read on a SARN face, then let out a low sound that I eventually understood to be something close to a laugh. 11 years, he said, and none of us ever read that part of the briefing either. We assumed the lip was decoration. "It's not decoration," I said. "It's exactly 4 centimeters, built for grav fluctuation near the docking clamps." "You read the entire document," Velik said, "not the summary, the entire document." "I read all the documents," I said. "It's part of my job to know how the platforms are built. Cargo routing depends on it." Velik sat back, and something in his posture shifted, the kind of shift a person makes when they have just recalculated an assumption they had been carrying for a very long time. "Braxa did not fall because you were strong," he said. "He did not fall because you fought him. He fell because you understood something about this station that he did not, and you were simply standing where you were supposed to stand." I had not thought of it that way before, but he was right, and once he said it out loud, the whole shape of the story changed in my mind. It was never really about a shove or a fall. It was about the gap between what people assumed of me and what was actually true, and how wide that gap could get before something on the other side of it finally slipped. The story did not end there, though I wished, for a while, that it would. 2 weeks after the meeting with Velik, I was asked to speak at a small gathering organized by the station's labor office, a mixed audience of SARN supervisors and human dock workers, meant to discuss what the administration was now calling revised expectations regarding physical safety assumptions across species. It was a dry title for a meeting that turned out to be anything but dry. I stood at the front of a half-filled room, more nervous than I had been on the platform itself, and told the story exactly as it had happened, without embellishment, because the truth needed no embellishment. A young SARN loader near the back, barely out of training, raised a clawed hand and asked the question that, I think, everyone in the room actually wanted answered. "Were you scared?" he asked, "when he grabbed you?" "For a second," I said. "Just for a second. Then I remembered where my feet were, and I wasn't scared anymore. I was just standing still." Grace Doyle, a fellow human cargo worker who had come to the meeting out of curiosity, leaned toward me afterward and said something I still think about. "You didn't win because you were tough," she said. "You won because you paid attention. That's a different kind of strength, and it took them completely by surprise." She was right, and the fact that it had taken them by surprise was the part that stayed with the station longest. Word moved through the docks the way word always does, passed from supervisor to supervisor, worker to worker. until the phrase read the whole briefing had turned into something close to a joke and a warning at the same time, repeated by both species whenever a task required more attention than someone wanted to give it. Braxa did not disappear after the meeting, and I want to be honest about that, because it would be easy to tell this story as if he simply vanished in shame. He did not. He completed his mandatory safety refresher, the one every loader supervisor now had to repeat after the incident, and 3 weeks later, he found me in the corridor outside the cargo routing office, waiting, arms crossed, looking far less imposing than he had on the platform. "I have been told I owe you an apology," he said, which is not exactly the same as offering one, but I understood what it cost a man like him to say it at all. "You don't owe me anything," I said. "You made a mistake. I happened to be standing in the right place when you made it." "That is not how my crew sees it," he said. "They see a human who did not fall, and now every young Zarn on this dock hesitates before they shove past anyone, human or otherwise, in case the ground gives out from under them instead." "Maybe that's not the worst outcome," I said. He was quiet for a moment, his gray eyes studying me the way Velix had, recalculating something. "No," he said finally. "Maybe it is not." He walked away after that, and I did not see him again for several months, though I heard, through the usual channels of dock gossip, that he had become notably more careful with every worker who crossed his path, regardless of their size. The story could have ended there, quietly, the way most workplace incidents eventually fade into routine. But 6 months later, something happened that made it clear the platform drop had changed more than just one supervisor's habits. I was standing on Platform 9 again, waiting for the same shuttle, when a large Uladry trader, new to the station and clearly unfamiliar with its customs, tried to push past a young human courier named Oliver Bright, who was standing near the boarding rail with a delivery crate balanced against his hip. The trader reached out with one broad hand, the exact same motion Braxa had used on me months earlier, and the entire platform seemed to freeze at once. "Wait," someone shouted from the crowd, and I recognized the voice as belonging to Nathan Price, who had apparently come to watch a different shuttle depart, and happened to be standing close enough to see it unfold. "The lip, watch the lip." The Uladry trader hesitated, his hand still extended, clearly confused by the sudden shout, and in that half-second of hesitation, Oliver simply stepped back on his own, out of the trader's path, calm and unbothered, the crate still balanced perfectly against his hip. "Sorry," Oliver said, with a small, easy smile. "Wasn't trying to make you learn the hard way." The trader blinked at him, clearly aware that something significant had almost happened, and equally aware that he did not fully understand what it was, and mumbled an apology before continuing on his way, considerably more carefully than before. I heard about the moment later that day, and Grace, when she told me, was laughing so hard she could barely finish the sentence. "They warned him," she said. "An entire platform full of strangers warned a complete stranger about the lip, because of you. Because of one moment nobody even meant to create." I did not create that moment on purpose, and I think that is the part of the story most worth remembering. I was not trying to prove anything about humanity that day on Platform 9. I was not trying to send a message to anyone. I was simply standing where the deck told me to stand, paying attention to something small that almost everyone else had learned to ignore. But somewhere along the way, that small moment of attention became a story other people told each other, a story that changed how careful people were with one another. A story that made an entire platform full of strangers shout a warning to protect someone they had never met before, simply because they remembered what happened the last time somebody assumed a person would simply fall out of their way. Velik Doss retired from his position a year later, and at his farewell gathering, in front of a room full of Sarn and human workers together, he raised a cup of something warm and pale and told the story of the platform drop one more time, though by then almost everyone in the room already knew every detail of it by heart. "We spent a long time assuming we understood this station and everyone on it," he said. "Then a young woman with excellent reading habits taught 15 years of us that assumptions are only useful until the moment someone stands still." The room laughed, the good kind of laugh, warm and familiar, and I laughed along with them, because by then the story had become something gentler than the shove that started it, something closer to a shared joke between two very different kinds of people who had learned, slowly and honestly, to look a little more carefully at each other. I still work cargo routing on the same station. I still read every safety document in full, not because I expect another platform drop, but because it has simply become who I am. The same way standing my ground on that particular afternoon had never really been a choice at all. It was just attention, applied at exactly the right moment, and it turned out that attention, more than strength or size or reputation, was the thing nobody on that platform had accounted for. And every so often, when a new arrival steps onto platform 9 and reaches out to move someone aside without looking down first, somebody in the crowd still calls out the same warning that started with me, half joking, half serious, entirely true. Watch the lip.